With the midterms less than 100 days away, new polling shows President Trump's approval rating continues to slip. The latest Economist YouGov poll shows support for Trump's job performance has fallen to 34%. That's tied for a record low of both of Trump's terms in office. The poll shows 62% disapprove, producing a record net approval of negative 28.
Yeah, David French, these polls are, I was going to say all over the place. The president's polls aren't all over the place. His numbers obviously are lower than they've been. I've got to say, though,
very low.
Every couple of years, when you see a president's approval rating, you're going to know how off your elections are going to go. They're the greatest indicator of that. And yet, all of these polls that we're seeing on ballot tests between Republicans and Democrats, one day you'll see a poll that has Democrats up 87 points. The next it'll be 1. I mean, I exaggerate just a little bit, but they are all over the place. And when I see polls that show the Democrats only having a 1 or 2 point advantage, despite everything that's going on, despite the worst, the most expensive grocery prices in 50 years, the highest gas prices, all of these other things going on, you sit there and wonder, man, do the Democrats have what it takes to win the elections, especially when it looks like the DNC's broke and the Republican Party has all the money?
Yeah, I mean, look, the fact that Trump is president is all the proof that you need that the Democrats aren't that popular. So part of the Trump theory of the case, part of the theory of the case of MAGA is they don't actually have to be all that popular. They just have to be more popular than the Democrats. The old saying that you don't have to be the fastest person in the party. You just have to be faster than the slowest person if you're trying to outrun a bear. And so they're looking at the Democrats, and we've seen reporting that the Republicans are trying to turn it into a hate election that might be saying something along the lines of, as much as you don't like President Trump, the Democrats are worse. And that message is going to land on a lot of receptive ears, and it's going to especially land on receptive ears there's evidence of ideological radicalization in Democratic ranks. Because the problem with the Democratic Party was not that it was too moderate. The problem with the Democratic Party has long been its radicalization. And with now that renewing once again through this sort of DSA insurgents, the Republicans are looking at that and saying our approval ratings aren't going to tell the whole tale. At least that's their theory, as long as we can drive the Democratic approval ratings lower than ours.
So, Jonathan Lemire, your latest piece for The Atlantic is titled Trump Crashes into Reality. And you write in part this: recent months have delivered a reckoning for Trump, who has crashed hard against some real limits. The war in Iran, a conflict that he once thought would only take a few weeks, has hit a 5-month mark. Trump is also flailing domestically. His approval numbers have sunk, and Republicans are finally, in small doses, beginning to defy him. Once the midterms are over, Trump could face his worst fear: irrelevance. He will be a lame duck down to his final 2 years in office, and at some point will no longer be the nation's top topic of conversation. Washington will turn its focus to the 2028 presidential campaign. With no incumbent in the race and no clear frontrunner in either party, it will be as wide open as any race in decades. Some of the president's allies have begun to privately wonder how he might handle a new reduced status. No one suspects that he'll take it well. I think there are some assumptions being made about the midterms that I won't argue right now. But one thing to be clear, Jonathan, this administration claimed this war was fight was over and they had done these decisive actions 2-3 weeks in, only to be proved horribly wrong.
No question there. I mean, Trump is someone who, look, through his remarkable decade at the pinnacle of American political power, has been able to sort of assert his own reality. He'll just say things over and over and over again. He'll lie through his teeth, and at least enough of the country will believe him. And he's so good at creating headlines that he's able to navigate out of jams that would have ended any other politician's career. We have seen that stop working, dramatically so, most notably with Iran, where he has repeatedly said that the war is over. We win. It's over. It's done. It's not. He had to sign an MOU that was very favorable to Tehran. And even now, that's not holding. The Strait of Hormuz still in Iran's hands, and he can bluster as much as he wants about how things are going. The reality is there that Iran, in many ways, is more powerful now than it was at the end of February. As for the domestic politics, yes, I mean, strategists that I talk to in both parties do think Democrats will likely take at least one of the houses of Congress. But to your point, Mika, of course, that's no guarantee. And we know Democrats are certainly very concerned. Republicans will do everything they can to suppress voter turnout, to put their thumb on the scale, to frankly, in the word of one Democrat I spoke to this week, try to steal it. That it's not a given that the Dems will take power. But if they do, right, and they can open investigations into President Trump, that will hinder his agenda for sure, but also hasten his lack of or his fading relevance. He'll careen into what he would hate the most, Joe, which is the idea he might not be the most talked about person in America anymore.